Usually takes minutes. She does.
All right. Good evening. The time is now 5 o'clock on April 3rd, and it's time to call a Public Safety Committee meeting to order. Chief, will you please note attendance? Thank you. At this time, we typically... All right, at this time, we typically ask whether there are any members of the public who would like to speak to a matter that is not on the agenda. At this time, there are no members of the public who are in council chambers, and there are no members of the public that are currently online. Accordingly, we will move forward from here. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. These are the minutes from March 20th of 2023. Committee members, are there any questions, comments, or concerns about the minutes?
Looks good to me.
All right.
That's all I needed.
Sounds good. In that case, we'll take them as approved. The next item that we have, it's Agenda Bill 23-050. This is the Memorandum of Understanding with the Snoqualmie Valley School District, number 410 for the School Resource Officer Program. City Attorney Sturmick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, members of the committee. As indicated, this is concerning an updated memorandum of understanding with the school district for the school resource officer. I'm going to invite the chief just to tell you a little bit about what the SRO does, and then I can tell you about what this new MOU does versus the arrangement that's been in place since this started in 2013.
Thank you. I'm not going to mess this up, am I? Well, I'm sure you probably have a good idea what the SRO does, School Resource Officer. Currently Kim Stonebreaker. It's a position that's a specialty position that is assigned to not just the high school, which is predominantly where she's at, I would say 99% of the time, but she's also responsible for the middle schools and the elementary as well. And so her responsibilities are more of a mentor. She focuses on building relationships and trusts with the youth that she's with, and not necessarily being that law enforcement officer, if you will, on site, although that is a responsibility that she does have. That is an important part of that relationship, is that she's able to take care of an issue if it needs to be taken care of. But she's kind of an assist, if you will, for the school district to maintain the safety of a school premises. And that's basically what a school resource does in the short side. If you want me to go on the long side, I'd be here all day, because believe it or not, they do just about everything. They can be a counselor, they can be the cop on the beat, they can be somebody to cry, on her shoulder, and also to celebrate good wins by the youth in that school. So she just plays a big part of what we do and how we build relationships with the youth.
So the reason for the update right now is that it's the result of some statutory changes a few years ago that have come out of some of the conversations about law enforcement reform. And there's certainly been school districts, both in the state, in the region, and around the country, where there's been a bit of either a pushback or a withdrawal from relationship with local police departments. And so the statute that was statutory amendments that were put in place primarily governing school districts require them to enter into written contracts with, if they use a security firm or with a law enforcement agency, that spell out the process for appointment, removal of an SRO, minimum training requirements, clarify that the SRO is not to be used for incidents that would typically be the subject of school disciplinary processes and things of that nature. A lot of those aspects were already in the contract that the city has had with the districts over the years, but this gave us an opportunity to walk through the statute and address each of the items, add a process more specifically by which the district could receive and resolve complaints if there were any about the SRO. Some school districts have received complaints by parents or by school students in the school. So there's a process in there now for that. There's a long list of training requirements. I think the chief can speak to those in more detail if anyone would like. I think almost all or all of those were training requirements that were already met by the SRO. So it didn't really necessitate any change in operations. And then some of the language is mirrored from the statute that what the school resource officer will and won't do and won't be involved in typical disciplinary matters that are better handled by the school, and that the SRO, while he or she can be, as the chief said, a counselor and play all these informal roles, they're not a teacher. And so it's trying to kind of more clearly define those lines, and it took a little conversation back and forth just to, while we're trying to address the statute, make sure also that we're preserving the officer's ability to respond as a law enforcement officer in their discretion when they determine it's needed. And then similarly, even though we're providing a process here for the district and the superintendent to provide input into the selection process or removal, that ultimately that assignment has to be made by the chief. And so we have some language there that makes that clear. Happy to take questions or speak in more detail. Otherwise, I think
Councilmember
Chief-
Benson.
Yeah, I did write down a couple of questions looking over the MOU, and I got them to the chief last minute, but I didn't think to send them to you. Why would I? They're, legal questions. So I apologize for not getting these to you in
my
advance.
associate attorney here can speak to those, I'm sure.
So a couple things in the COVID-19 section. The city no longer mandates that city employees get vaccines for COVID-19, so the city cannot guarantee that there will be an SRO candidate who has taken the vaccine forever. So should that fact be stipulated in the MOU? I know that currently we have candidates that have taken the vaccine, but we can't guarantee that forever because city employees are not required to take that vaccine.
Correct. And,
So-
and the agreement's not in place forever, although it has a term through the end of next year and then an opportunity for it to be automatically renewed.
So
The city would have the ability to give notice of termination if we found ourselves in a position of still needing, if the district still has their policy in place and still needing to supply someone who is vaccinated and we didn't have an employee, we would have the ability to terminate at that point.
All right, and then the other question that I had, and I wrote it down, and I want to make sure that I say it the way I wanted to say it, so I'm just going to read it. Understandably, this MOU has a great deal of detail about the responsibilities and expectations of the SRO and about the reasons and procedures for pursuit of grievances by the district of the SRO. But is there a reason that there is no section in this MOU about the expectation that an SRO acting properly in his or her duties should expect full support of the school district? Or should the officer be concerned that district support for the SRO is not to be expected? If our officers are safe in expecting support from the school district in the proper execution of their duties, why isn't that part of this MOU?
Chief can maybe speak to part of this. I don't believe that either the SRO or the police department, the police officers or the department expect district staff to act as law enforcement officers in the event of an incident. And
Well,
so,
just to make myself, my concern is that there are a lot of school district positions that are political positions, and in the event that I'm just hypothetically imagine a political situation where police aren't supported by the people in those positions. That's what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about making sure that our police officers can operate understanding that they're going to be supported when they do their job right, and that they're not going to be undermined for any reasons, political or otherwise, in the proper execution of their job. And as this is, it's obvious that you would expect the district to support them, and I'm sure that we can, but this is a memorandum of understanding, so everything in it should be understood. So, I know that I personally would feel much more comfortable if that understanding was delineated in this memorandum.
Do you want to take a?
I'm not sure how I can answer that if it's not in the MOU, except for, I can talk in the past. I can't talk in the future, which is what you're talking about, on having a guarantee that they support our SRO. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all I can go with is the past history since I've been here and to this day is the level of support, even during the mass exodus, if you will, of school districts getting rid of SROs and so forth. Our school district here reached out and supported ours and said, we are not even thinking of losing our SRO. We support our SRO, and that's how it's been since I've been here, through every superintendent, and the current superintendent is absolutely supportive of the SRO. Forward, I don't know. All I can hope is that support stays the same. So I don't know.
Councilmember Benson.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's fantastic. I love hearing that. And it seems to me that if that's the case, then nobody should have any problem with that being referenced in the MOU. I would like to see it in there, and I'm sure that we've got some legal mind that could craft an extra line or two in it that indicates that the police understand that they'll be supported in the proper execution of their duties as SRO.
City Attorney Sirbank, did you have something to
Well,
add?
I'm looking to the chair, since whenever we're addressing an agreement like this, I'm interested to hear from the council or the committee as a whole. I could go back through and try to look for some place to include a general statement like that. I can tell you that we started with some language that that's been since revised, that spoke to arrests only occurring outside of school hours, only occurring as a last resort, the type of language that, from our perspective, put school personnel in the role of making law enforcement decisions. And so we feel like this strikes a much better balance. But I'm only describing this to give you a perspective on where the conversation started versus the language that you have in front of you right now. We could certainly speak to the district about adding a more affirmative statement of support. I'll look to the mayor about and the chief as to their thoughts on how that conversation might go.
I think that it's already been through the district and it's already been through our police group. And I think both parties have been satisfied with what is included in there and what's excluded. And so if you want to add 6 more weeks onto this, it'll probably take that long just to get one little line in there, but.
Councilmember Benson.
I feel, looking over the MOU, there is a whole lot of specifics about how the district can take grievance against the SRO. There's a whole lot of that, and I'm fine with that. I don't have a problem with that, because I think our SRO is going to do a great job and is going to follow procedure and do everything he or she is supposed to do. But if we're willing to take that kind of care to imagine every terrible possibility from one side, then I don't think that it is inappropriate for us to expect that our SRO will be supported by the district. They're paying 40% of the salary of the officer. So that shows that they want the officer, they need the officer. I don't think it's inappropriate to include some sort of expectation
language like that the response I would hear from the other lawyer would be, well, what kind of support are you asking for? non-interference, or do you want people to step up and do particular tasks? So I'm interested in whatever clarification.
Yeah, I would like to know more clearly what it is that you're exactly asking for, because as we go forward with an agreement like this, saying that we want support for our police officers, which as I understand it has been something that we've experienced in the past, but in terms of actually codifying this down into the contract, like, are you expecting them to say that staff members will act in a certain way in given situations? Are you saying that the school board itself will be doing this, that the superintendent? It's a little bit vague for me to understand how we would
Okay,
incorporate that language into the
great, let's make it
contract.
more specific. If the school wishes to remove or reprimand or in any way sanction our school resource officer, I think that there should be an expectation that they give specific ways that the school resource officer has violated the procedures that they're required to do. Because there have been a great many police officers who have been targeted for defunding, for they've been fired, they've been suspended, and they haven't done anything that was not the procedure they were trained to do. And in many cases, it's been done for political reasons. And they've been accused of being part of a system that was in some way biased. And I want to make sure that we don't have that happening to our officers in this situation.
So wouldn't, though, to the extent that we have complaints or people making inappropriate comments, wouldn't that be handled through the grievance process and then handled through the existing rules that we have?
I didn't see anything in there that I saw it only in one direction. I saw that the district can take grievance against the officer, but that there's nothing protecting the officer from them taking that grievance. I think that there should be an expectation that they will not have grievance taken against them if they are following procedure. If they are following their training and procedure, and which has all been accepted by the district, then they should be able to be assured that the district isn't going to be coming after them for any other reasons.
City Attorney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So with respect to the grievance process, that's primarily to outline how someone, parent, student, third party, would raise a complaint through the school process, and how the superintendent or designee would deal with and address that person's complaint. However, and we added some language to that after some conversation with the district to make sure that the city, the chief, is informed of the complaint, has an opportunity to provide input, provide the city's view of the facts. But those grievance provisions do not give the superintendent or the district the power to change the assignment. That is reserved to the police chief, and it's in Article 8 on the top of page 10. There's a process, it's titled SRO replacement. There's a process by which the district may request that the chief relieve an officer from that assignment, and a process for them to give input and the police chief to consider it. But it specifically says that the chief's decision about whether to replace or not is the chief's and is final. So that's part of the back and forth that I was trying to describe before, where we made our best efforts to preserve the authority and discretion to the police department, for those things that should be fairly within the chief's control, which is law enforcement actions and decision-making, including the proper assignment or non-assignment of the individuals involved to serve in that position.
Councilmember Watton, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I appreciate Councilmember Benson's passion. I think that, it's as we watch what happens in other communities and across the country, there's certainly a concern about this defunding movement. But as I look at the MOU, and I go to my one resource, which is MRSC, to see what other jurisdictions have out there that are being shared. They're quite brief. This one's quite detailed and lengthy. And unless there's a certain circumstance that we could come across and where we may want to take some extra steps, until those are some sort of precedent there, I guess I would operate under the notion of mutual trust. And then come 24, when this is renegotiated, that we could take actions then. I don't think this is a community where that's prevalent. I think if anything, people appreciate, the police being proactive, and we've got a wonderful resource officer. My only concern is if she weren't there, and who would be able to step into that role. And she does an exceptional job from what I've heard and seen. So, but duly noted.
Yeah,
I think, Matt?
yes.
Yeah, I think everything that you're saying is understood, and I would love to see it in the memorandum of understanding.
I just want to say one more thing about who has the authority here. And their grievance process is their process. We have our process. In fact, our grievance process is very similar to theirs. But that decision comes solely down to me on whether or not the SRO stays in there, or is this reassigned, or if there's maybe a need to take them out. But that's my decision based on whatever the circumstances present themselves. They can have issues and grievances and so forth. And those are things that I have discussions with the superintendent that is talked about in here, that we do communicate back and forth about what the grievance is. But ultimately, it says right here, the decision, my decision, is final. And they agreed to that. So they can go through all those pages of grievances, which I will listen to, but the decision's mine. And so I think that should cover you. And I do appreciate your passion for taking care of and concerned about the welfare of our police officers, because I will tell you, there's nobody more concerned than I am. Nobody.
Councilmember Benson.
Yeah, well, I totally believe that. And that, wait, don't leave yet. If you could, obviously not specifically, but in general, the grievances that you've encountered in the past, what is the general nature of those grievances?
Well, I think those are like personnel issues, but they've been very, very minor. Whether the SRO should have maybe counseled instead of maybe taking a little bit more of an enforcement tact, some of those. But that's common when you have an academic environment and a law enforcement view. There's some conflict there because of just the focus. But that's why the SRO is so important, because they have to have the focus of the children and what the benefit of them is, not necessarily arrest, bringing them in, all those kind of things. That's a last resort. But I just go back to the what I said before. We're talking about all these issues, but ultimately it does really come down to me. It comes down to me. And though I do, like I said, I love your passion, and now I know that we have people that truly care about our officers. And what you're asking, I know why you're asking it, and I may not disagree with it, but I think it's in here for the fact that the bottom line is they can do the grievance. They can come and say, you know what, we felt that was at fault and there's cause to reassign. And I can look at it and say, this is why I don't believe it is, or I may say, yes, it is. But if I don't, I can tell them this may not be. They've agreed to that. They've agreed to allowing me to make that decision. So, that's what I steadfast. And when we developed this and read this, that was my one thing. And I remember talking to Bob about that. That decision has to come down to me. The officer is employed by the city and not by the city or not by the school district, although they pay 40%, still an employee of the police department. So I have to retain that authority to remove or not to remove. And they agreed to that. So I think that should cover, that should cover what you're asking.
City Attorney.
Just to chime in on that, Chief, as he said, as he indicated, has the final decision on to replace or not replace. What we tried to do structurally in the agreement was build on the existing relationship that the chief was describing, which has been one of pretty much a mutual trust, I think. And so there are these processes in here for exchange of information and input from the other side, and then it spells out who makes the decision. And we have a term. And so if chief makes a decision and the district is dissatisfied with it, they may give us notice at the end prior to the end of the term. Thanks, we think we're done with these services. Or conversely, if the department mayor and the city administrator were to determine that the department's not being supported sufficiently, the city would have the same ability to to withdraw from the relationship. But in the meantime, we did the best we could to make sure the information was flowing back and forth, that both sides had their opportunity for input, and then that the responsibility for certain decisions rested in the right place. In the case of the assignment of the SRO with the chief, or in the case of resolving a parent or student or third-party grievance with the district.
Thank you. Councilmember Benson?
Are you understanding my concerns? My concern is that reading this memorandum of understanding, grievance and complaints toward cops are understood, right? And I think that at least in the city of Snoqualmie, support of the police should also be understood. I think that both can exist in the same memorandum of understanding, and my personal opinion is that they both should. And I feel very comfortable with what you've said, Chief, and with what you've said, but I do feel like we live in a time when things that are understood need to be written down, and we need to say, we understand this. And one of the things that I really wish that we would delineate is that we understand that support of the police is important.
Thank you. Councilmember Watton, do you have anything to add?
I'd move to put it on the consent agenda for the next meeting.
I would agree with that. My reasoning is because I appreciate the comments from the city attorney and from the chief, and I think that with the chief being able to keep an eye on how things are going at the school, both through grievances and other things, I think that we have enough protection in place for the police at this time. We can look at it again in a year to the extent that we start seeing issues where things are deteriorating or we need to work on communication. I mean, we have the opportunity to come back and renegotiate for 2024 and address it at that point. I do agree that it's important that our police officers are supported and that we do that. I don't know that I necessarily think that it's the right place to put it into the MOU, just in terms of trying to enforce it or working through those types of things. But I think that as long as we keep the communication open and that we're not having an issue at this point, I do feel comfortable putting it forward based on the negotiations that have already taken place. I am sensitive to what she said, though, and I think that it is really important that we make sure that our officers know that they're supported and that they're gaining that, because it is incredibly important. They do a huge amount of service for our community. So I think for those reasons, I would recommend putting on the consent agenda, and then we can talk about it more in a year. Councilmember Benson?
Well, I'm totally fine with that. I don't have to whine and complain about this again in front of the whole council. It's what I have you here for. But I would like to consider that when this is rewritten, it's not a memorandum of accusation. It's a memorandum of understanding. And it sounds like what I'm wanting in there is something that is understood. So it doesn't seem to me like there's a barrier for us to somehow point out, hey, here's something that's understood. Isn't this cool that we all agree on this?
I do have a question on a different point.
Yes.
COVID vaccination. So it's based on the directive of proclamation 21-14-1.
And the mayor's astutely pointing out that some language referring to the governor's proclamations that existed at the time when the parties began exchanging drafts and is no longer in
Not
place. And I
understood.
actually pointed that out to the district's lawyer this week, that we may need to circle back and make sure that this is referring to the correct proclamation, and the district can give us some input about whether they are continuing to maintain this posture despite the changes in the
Right.
proclamation
Because the way it's
or
written, it
not.
no longer applies.
Correct,
Right.
correct.
The one other thing that I'd note too is under analysis, I think it states that it specifies criteria, blah, 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 and the selection and placement of an MOU. And I think that was supposed to say SRO. So that's the only other note that I'd quickly add to that.
There was another, am I thinking of the right thing? Oh yeah, there was another place where it looked like there was a typo in it. I'm sorry, Chair, I didn't ask to be recognized.
Councilmember Benson.
I apologize. There was somewhere, I think it was near the beginning. Oh, maybe you're talking about the exact same one that I saw.
Under
where
analysis?
It was, I think it was up at the very beginning.
Under
Sorry,
A.
I'm scrolling. I am actually doing something here. Where is it? I think it's on the first page. Yeah, there we go. Provision of SRO right there.
Right.
The city shall, one, regularly employed. I think there's supposed to be another word in there, maybe provide or
Assign.
assign. Okay, there we go. That was it.
All right, thank you. All right, in that case, unless there's anything further, we should go ahead and move on to item number 3, which is discussion of the CEMP review grant request update.
All right, so Chief Carrera is off today, so he had me prepare a couple things for this. So for the review grants request update, I'm just going to kind of go through what he put here. So we applied for unallocated emergency management grant funds, EMPG, I refer to it, but did not get the grant. It ended up going to 12 different counties and one city, which was Tukwila. The original quote from Tetra Tech to update the CMP was 45 to 50,000, and the original grant request was for 28,000, leaving 22,000 for the city to fund. We get EMPG funds every year. Just for example, for 2022, we get EMPG funds every year. And then in addition, for 2022, we requested funding to support the city's community rating system application. We have funds available from our 2021 grants. We use those dollars to cover the CRS project. And basically the CRS project is the insurance rating for, it's kind of like same as what WSRB for fire. It's the insurance rating piece kind of with planning. So they were able to use the monies for that out of 2021, but there was money in 2022 allocated for that. So Chief is going back and requesting to Tetra, the one that was going to do the CMP, to see if they can revise their bid and get it closer to 35 or 40,000. If they agree to do that, he's planning on using 10,000 from the 2022 EMPG funds originally planned for the CRS and apply it to the cost. This would keep us close to being on target with the original plan of using 25 to 30,000 of city funds coupled with the money from EMPG. That's basically the update. So it sounds like we didn't get the grant, but he's looking for ways to try and get them to agree to lower the cost so that we could still kind of come in what he had planned on, what he had budgeted using the same amount of city funds.
Councilmember Benson.
Was this grant money that we were assuming that we were getting, and we made an errant assumption, or we were, because do not remember. I apologize. Or was it said this is something that we're applying for and hoping that we get?
I believe it was something we were applying for, hoping we would get
Okay.
to be able to help offset the cost.
Okay.
I don't believe it was budgeted for that we were going to get it.
Thank you. Anything further? All right. In that case, let's go ahead and move on to NORCOM, please.
Okay, so NORCOM, just to touch a little bit, Chief wanted me to touch on, just as a reminder, kind of a high level about what NORCOM does for us, and then talk about the principal meeting that's coming up. So if you remember, NORCOM is the dispatchers or the radio group for the fire department. So they cover 14 different fire agencies, pretty much from I-90 up around all the way around the shoreline is who they cover for fire service. They also do police service for a couple different departments, Bellevue, Clyde Hill, and some of that. But they are not our primary 911 system per se. When somebody calls 911 from the city of Snoqualmie, the phone call first goes down to Issaquah and is answered by Issaquah's PSAP, same as our police calls. They ask, is it police or fire related? If it's police, they take care of it. If it's fire related, they immediately transfer it to NORCOM in downtown Bellevue. That's where their main office is. Then NORCOM will handle the call, fire, medical, and then it goes out from there. And this is all done fairly quickly. There's not much of a break. So that's when a citizen from Snoqualmie calls 911, that's what's going to happen is it goes to Issaquah first, then it goes to NORCOM. So, and we've been, it used to be called Eastside Communications. It's been called NORCOM for quite a while. And it's the assembly of all the different fire departments together that put it up. So the city does have representation at NORCOM. There's a couple of committees that the chief sits on the admin board. So each city, each district that is part of NORCOM has a seat on the admin board. So they get a vote on the different things, budgets, anything that comes up as, routine business through NORCOM. So we do have a say in that. And then also we have a liaison. There's a fire liaison with NORCOM. His name is Corey James, and he used to be a dispatcher. Now he's on the admin side, but he comes to a lot of our meetings, the ops chiefs meetings, the chiefs meetings. So he's kind of like a conduit where if we have questions from NORCOM, we can, he can find out answers for us, and he kind of acts as a go-between for us. For NORCOM services, we pay around $60,000 a year, and that's broken up into quarterly billings and it's something that's budgeted for. There is a formula that accounts for what that dollar amount is. It stays pretty steady, but it does go up from year to year. And it's based, part of the formula is how much we use it. So the more calls we have, the higher the cost is going to be from year to year. So, I mean, there's a complicated, it's more than just the call volume, but that's a piece of it. So the more you use the system, the more you pay for it. So coming up is they have what's called a principals assembly. And this is an opportunity for the elected officials to come and kind of get a year's review of NORCOM's activities, kind of like a presentation of their annual report, talking about the good things that NORCOM did over the last year. This is something that they've had in place since the NORCOM agreement started. I want to say it was at least probably 10 years, or if not longer, that we've been that it's been NORCOM instead of Eastside Communications. Normally, they invite the public safety chair, the mayor, the city administrator, and the fire chief are invited to come to these meetings, or to come to this annual report principals meeting. At the request of the board chair, they wanted to also extend that invitation to the rest of the public safety committee members. So I believe that was part of the talking about NORCOM today, was just to make sure that invite was put out there. That principals meeting is April 14th at 9 a.m. at Bellevue City Hall. That's when it's going to be held. So that's just kind of a real quick rundown of what NORCOM is. Is there any questions I can field about the dispatch?
Any questions, council members? I went last year, or at least I attended virtually, and I thought it was helpful. It was interesting information to know. But
He did mention that he thought that besides the public safety committee members, he did say that there is opportunity if you wanted to, you could also extend the invite to other council members, just because they do take the opportunity to kind of, go a little bit deeper about exactly what NORCOM is, what they do. And so they could, if, some of the newer, council members might benefit from hearing about what it is but it is, I didn't hear anything about a virtual option. They did tell me at an earlier meeting today that it was, at City Hall. So I'm assuming it's an in-person this time.
Yeah, I didn't see anything about it on the invite about it being
There's no,
online again this year. I think it's just in
no,
person.
there,
I think there's an option.
Is there?
That's the only way I can attend. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think there was,
I know
And
that I'm going to
there-
be out of town at that time, but there's the potential that I'll have Wi-Fi that would allow me to hop in on that.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. All right. So I think that concludes the items that are on the agenda for this evening. Coming up, we will have the permit parking ordinance. Chief, did you want to speak to that?
That's going to be on an upcoming,
Okay, you hopped up. I didn't know if you wanted to address it.
I just wanted to have an update on the legislation.
Absolutely. Always welcome. Thank you.
Did have a couple items, take a couple of your moments to talk about. One is the safest city. I know that the safest cities organization, which evaluates communities throughout the nation, has evaluated us as the 10th safest. And some people might think that that's not a good thing because we are number one. We've been in the top 5, probably 5 of the last 7 years, but we've always been in the top 10. I think we just need to also be happy about 10. I will tell you that violent crime, which is what it is, we are in the top, we're 4. We're the 4th safest as far as violent crime goes. And so that's a big plus for living in this community. And it just shows you what we're dealing with property crimes. Property crimes is what put us up to 10. So there's reasons, they're no secret. We've been talking about it for a while. And this is just an indication of what that is. But to say that I'm discouraged or not happy about being in the number 10 in the safest communities in the state of Washington is not true, because I am still very proud for the level of officers that we have, how far we've been down on staffing, and they still maintain that kind of level of service is pretty amazing, to be honest with you. So I just want to portray that it's a positive thing. It is not a negative thing. So the other thing I had is the legislation, which we are, hopefully getting down to the end, but both last Tuesday night with both the pursuit and the Blake fix, if you will, were voted on by the House Safety Committee, and both passed. Now they're being, in fact, today, I don't know what the results were today, but there was a hearing this morning at 9 o'clock on the pursuit bill, and I'm kind of gonna have to check on that. But so they're both going to be going forward down to the floor to ultimately on Tuesday, I think tomorrow they're going to be on the floor. And there's still a possibility that some of it may not be good for what I would like. So there's still some changes that could happen. But right now, as we've talked about before, they're both moving forward. There was another one that I wanted to bring up that you may have heard about. I surely have been watching it and am kind of amazed that it continues to go. And that's House Bill, or it's SB 5274. And it's regarding, the intent is really, really good. The intent was trying to get more applicants, more candidates for civil service type positions. But what I got focused on was it says removing the language requirements, meaning reading and writing English, removing that requirement. So in other words, this bill, which is still moving forward with quite a bit of support, will require that not be used anymore as far as a requirement. But the chair did say something that was encouraging, and I want to read that. So it made me feel a lot better. He said, it does not change the requirements of the job. It does not eliminate the hiring authority to ultimately decide on whether someone can do the job. So you still have that discretion, still have that opportunity to say whether or not they can do the job or not. I think the manner in which they've done it is probably not the way I would have hoped. But I think their interest was, we need more cops, we need more civil service people. This is a way to do it. And I think with more discussions in the years to come, because this is going to come up again next year, if it doesn't get passed this year, that maybe we can have some wording in there that that'll help law enforcement out a little bit. I did also want to go back to the Blake. There's been discussion about whether, even the mayor has mentioned other communities and cities that have adopted other ordinances to deal with personal possession of drugs. If this passes in the manner that it's in, a city cannot write an ordinance. And the ones that did are going to not be valid. So that is another thing that's not a good thing about Blake as well. It takes these cities' opportunity to make a difference. If they don't like it, it takes their way out of their hands. I think that was it, unless you had any other questions.
Council members?
So Chief, thank you for the update. A couple things come to mind. One is you never get everything that you want on the first round, and it's incremental sometimes. Do you see that the progress is being incremental and that there's a possibility coming back next session to more fully address this?
It's going to be very, very difficult on both the Blake and the pursuit, but we are already started the process of doing that. Meeting with Washington WASPIC, Washington Association of Police Chiefs and Sheriffs, to start the discussion about how we can move forward instead of waiting for the January to start working on it. We're going to start working on it right now to see what we can do about that. It's going to be difficult though, but there is support. There's support in the legislature to make additional changes. There's just not enough support. But I'll tell you, we wouldn't be where we're at today, because even though these aren't what we hoped for, they're better than nothing. At least something was done. And there's no doubt that it would never happen without the support. Because law enforcement, we can go there and talk, and chiefs, and we can go before the committees and so forth, and they'll listen to us, and they may even hear us to a point. But I think they really, really got a lot of influence on the fact that council people, mayors from communities throughout the state were talking to them. In fact, I was at a hearing, and one of the committee members who was absolutely against the bill, which I think it was a pursuit one, absolutely 100% against it. She voted for it because her constituents wanted that. And she'd heard so much from them that she had to vote for them. Commend her, did her job.
That's good representation. That's great.
So, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think we're not going to stop, because you can see what's happening right now with like Blake. Overdoses are up, deaths associated with overdoses. In fact, number one killer right now in 18 to 39, I believe, overdoses. So you can see all the numbers going up. Traffic stuff, because the enforcement of traffic's going down. Fatals are higher than they've ever been in the state of Washington. Everything that we do not want to see is going up. So we're not going to quit trying to make that change.
Councilmember Wanton.
And a follow-up to your previous remarks, your earlier remarks about property crime. And is that an area that we need to spend a little more time in figuring out how to give you the tools needed? Or is it more a product of way things are today and what you can take from the recipe book from the state?
Well, there's one thing that I have, and it's competitive spirit. And that I think that when we get better staffing, which we're doing now, we have 2 in the academy right now. In fact, within 8 hours of rescinding the mandatory vaccination, I had a lateral reach out, and so immediate, hopefully the background's good, dividend from that decision. And so, we still may lose a 1 or 2. I'm not sure, but when we get staffing, I think that'll help out a lot. And then we've talked about the license plate reader. We've talked about some of that might be an assist, but I think a lot of it is just getting people out there.
Thank you.
Councilmember Benson.
And with regard to the property crime, how much of that agenda bill that we were talking about with the vehicle trespass is going to influence that?
The big part of that is the car prowls on that. That's going to make a big difference because I get videos quite often from people sending it my way where people are just checking doors. We see 2 or 3 of those in a row, we've got them. We usually have them identified too. And so that'll make a difference where before we could do nothing. They could try all the doors up and down every street in this community and we could do nothing. And that's what they do. Usually they don't break into a car. They don't have to. People leave their cars unlocked here. And, you know, eventually they're going to get 1 or 2 that are open.
Chief, for the FBI statistics, which is what the Safest Cities report was based on, for example, if someone's going down the street and trying all of those or going and stealing packages from multiple places, then when that gets reported to the FBI statistics, is that there have been 5 separate thefts if they're going off and stealing packages, or is it reported as one incident?
It depends on how we take the report. It could be 5 separate, because you got 5 separate victims. So it could be 5 separate, and that's called NIBRs, and how they take that data and it's sent to the FBI database, and then they take it from there. So, and that's our records that does all that. So that could be, in most cases, that would be 5 separate cases. So like if they do whether it rises to the level of a NIBRs reporting crime, it would take a substantial amount. But if, say, they did 10 porch where they were taking somebody's delivery, and they did 10 of them, you'd have 10 different victims. So
Because I was also wondering then too, especially for the folks that were breaking into the post office boxes, I was wondering if those then each would be classified as one separate.
those were taken on individual reports. Yeah. And the sad thing about what that was, we had the person doing that on a dead end street and we couldn't stop him. We just drove by. So we tried. He just didn't stop.
Thank you. And thank you also, I saw the good news about the person that was apprehended over the weekend as well. I think it was over the weekend.
Yes, a lady that was stealing
that.
packages from the porches. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. All right, if there's nothing further, let's go ahead and adjourn for the evening. Councilmembers, sound good? All right, the meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.